heard this sound many times. It's one of the most recognizable sonic identities in the history of design, right alongside Intel and Netflix. But where did it come from? Why does it sound the way it does? And why did this specific sound have such a profound impact on all of sound design? The story begins in 1967 with the Beatles' song A Day in the Life, specifically with its final chord, which follows almost 30 seconds of cacophony. This is very much in the spirit of the Beatles' creative period at the time and their most psychedelic and experimental album, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Naturally, it's an album beloved by all musicians and sound engineers, including Jim Reeves at Apple, who created this sound in the 80s. The reason for the sound's existence is quite straightforward. Back then, computers rebooted far more often than they do now, usually after an error. So greeting the user with an indicator that everything is okay called for a calm, pleasant musical interval. Look at this color. Is it calming? How about this one? Now look at these two shapes. It's a bit easier here, but let's still analyze and compare color, shape, and sound as methods of influencing us. Color is a component of the visuals we see. In fact, it's the smallest component, the bit, the unit. And yes, in design we talk about the psychology of colors and can use different colors for different purposes. But colors themselves don't have inherent perceptual qualities. Colors on their own are like letters. There's little meaning in them by themselves. Shape, on the other hand, already has significance, a specific meaning. That's because it's already a cultural element. Shapes are objects perceived visually, and vision is our primary channel for perceiving the world. 83% of all information is visual. In second place is hearing at about 11%. This is by volume of information, but not necessarily by importance. Any of our senses can provide information that proves more critical than anything else. Take touch, for example. If you spill hot coffee on yourself, that becomes the most important piece of information at that moment, no matter how beautiful your surroundings are. But there is a fundamental difference. For our ancestors, hearing was the most crucial early warning system. Ancestors so ancient that the neocortex, the part of the brain that houses our entire culture of perception, hadn't yet formed. Therefore, the human perception of sound is far less influenced by culture and is more universal across the entire population. As you've noted, basic reactions to sound are universal. A shriek signals alarm in any culture. A low growl signifies a threat. A smooth, harmonious melody brings a sense of calm. Of course, the perception of complex musical compositions is culturally conditioned, but the basic building blocks, pitch, timbre, volume, dissonance, or consonance, evoke similar base emotions in all people. This is precisely why sonic logos can be so effective, or conversely so irritating on a purely physiological level. This is exactly why sound design plays such a massive role. It hits deeper, is processed faster, and is more universal across all cultures. And what's important is that this is Apple's design path. It accesses our perception through physiology, through the more ancient parts of our brain where there is less culture and more universal reactions. But at the time, this wasn't really about Apple at all. These motifs can be traced back to Jobs' early philosophy in hindsight, but overall it wasn't yet so pronounced. It wasn't in the company's DNA. And this sound was one of the pioneers of the company's movement in this direction. Here, I'll make two small digressions. The Beatles and Apple actually have a long history. Apple Corps, which includes Apple Records, was a company that appeared long before Apple computers, and for a long time sued our modern Apple over the name. At the same time, there were many fans of the Beatles at Apple, the very band Apple Records represented. Therefore, one of the tasks for Apple computers was to make all its sounds non-musical, to avoid competing with Apple Records on purely formal grounds and exposing themselves to risk. This is one of the reasons why the sounds of that era are not melodies, but just sounds. Secondly, Jim Reeves couldn't get management to approve the implementation of this sound, but he believed in its importance. So he secretly had engineers hardwire the sound into the chip, creating the technical capability to play it on startup before the operating system itself loaded. These are small but interesting branches of the main story, and I accumulate a ton of them while preparing each video. That's why I run a free weekly email newsletter where I share lots of interesting things that didn't make it into the main video for one reason or another. For example, the entire last issue was dedicated to the new design of the Academy from OpenAI and why they chose those specific colors and that particular style. Head over to my Substack and subscribe. However, when you click the subscribe button, you won't get a sound effect or any haptic feedback. That's because the web, unlike gaming interfaces and operating systems, has historically made almost no use of these important perceptual channels. And while in the early stages of the internet's development this was likely just an oversight, now with billions of users accustomed to how things work online, the cost of change due to cultural pressure has become enormous. This in turn is starting to put pressure on related cultures. For example, the auditory channel is gradually being pushed out of operating systems. The volume control used to play a sound by default, but now it only does so if you hold down the Shift key. But the culture of sonic logos, though it originated before Apple, NBC Radio was already playing a recognizable jingle back in the 60s, was mainly technical in nature. Apple was one of the first to use it specifically as a signal to engage with the emotions of its users, and that changed a great deal. Both inside Apple, by directing their attention over the next decade to the use of perceptual anthropology in design, and outside Apple, by creating a trend for sonic logos that many companies would follow. And this is, without exaggeration, one of the two main turning points that defined the developmental trajectory of one of the world's wealthiest companies. The second turning point, which defined how Apple shapes the user's space, also lies in design. That's what our video, the one feature Apple and Microsoft refused to steal, is all about. Click it right now. That's all for here. See you.